Okay, so I'm going to get going here, and I'm just going to start off. So this is going to be a workshop for adapting things. I've been talking about in a previous video, something I'm kind of interested in. We are talking about adapting 5e to others, to different settings and different ideas, and I have been extremely interested in some video games, and I'd love to be able to adapt some of these. And I've thought of doing one about Helldivers, which quite a few people are playing, including myself. But we're going to get into this, and I'm hoping some people will join up. We've been streaming for about 3 minutes. I'm trying to figure out how to do this to multiple platforms at the same time. Get one on Twitch, get one on Facebook. I follow only a handful of people on Twitch, and I haven't really dove into it. Maybe I will try this on Twitch in the future. But for now, it is what it is. So, okay, so let's think about the system in general. I should have gotten myself some water. I'm going to get some water. Okay. So Remnant, for those people who don't know, Remnant 2 is a post-apocalyptic sci-fi fantasy with some interesting gameplay mechanics thrown in. And let's see if I can do this properly here. No, we're going to do this for a reason. Okay. So there's a couple things we need to think about. I'm going to put this file here so we can start talking. The first is going to be, we have classes, and they come in the form of archetypes. Then we've got the very specific weapons, the armor. There are things called mutators, which attach to weapons. We've got skills, which I guess falls into traits and skills. And let's see here. So we have, so we have the classes, which we're talking about here. And if I open this up, these are some of the weapons. We're going to be talking about those. We're going to be talking about some specific weapons. This is a weapon I have. I'm obviously going to try to adapt it to my own personal build. And we've got the armor sets, perks, and so forth. I should have swapped these. Next time I do one of these, I'll swap it so the screen's in front of me and not to the left of me, because I'm going to be constantly looking to the left instead of to the right, because I wanted to see the chat window, but maybe it would have been smarter to have swapped these. And I don't know whether or not I should try and do that now. Or whether or not it may be easier. Now we're just going to go with what we're doing now. Okay, so we've got put this down a little bit. There we go. Traits and skills. There are perks, which are part of the archetypes, and let's see what else we've got. So these are the traits. So traits are basically, so traits are these things. We'll deal with it in a little bit. And then we have, these are all the skills. We'll get into that in a second. And we will worry about combat in a second. These are some of the abilities. This is Bruiser. This is Gunslinger. This is the first one I'm going to be tackling. And so let's look into this. Armor, we'll figure out how armor works. So this is going to be adapting 5e to Remnant, not Remnant to 5e. So we are going to be breaking and twisting some of the rule systems to make this work. So the first thing we'll know that this is a third-person shooter. There's reflexes going into account, weak spots, and we're going to play with that in a little bit. We're not going to deal with actual dexterity of players. That's going to be stupid. We're not going to tackle that. We are going to tackle some of the other rule systems. We're going to stick with 5e architecture kind of the way it is. So the first thing to think about is going to be movement's not going to change, but dodging is going to be something that's a bit we're going to play with, because you want to be able to dodge. Remnant has a specific ability where it's basically you're diving out at the last second. Helldivers has this as well. A bunch of games have this quick dodge. We're going to try to incorporate this quick dodge. The only way to do the quick dodge, and this is something everyone's going to get a chance to do, is going to, let's see, so there's going to be a quick dodge. Those are the templates here. We're going to put that in its own little line. So we're talking about mechanics, and the first one we're going to have here is the quick dodge. And which a lot of people do. The quick dodge is something all characters are going to get. This is a reaction. Now, and this is a reaction to increase AC by, say, 5. And maybe more than that. We may go more. And maybe that's something that some of the rings can do. So we'll do that for now. Quick dodge reaction to increase AC by 5. Everyone gets that. And that's a strange rule to say everyone gets a reaction. But remember, creatures have multiple attacks. The other thing I want to play with, something that several games have, is stamina. And stamina is something we don't often see in a game. So stamina is going to cost things. And stamina, we'll say, is equal to your con score. Hey, Griff. And stamina is equal to your con score. Let's say, so if you have a 15 con, then you have a 15 stamina. And it will also say it if you don't drain stamina at the end of your turn, you regain your con modifier to stamina. That's just going to be an idea we're going to play with. I'm going to put how that works here in a second. Put up, let's put that as a bullet point so we're following this. So you don't drain stamina at the end of your turn, you regain your con mod to stamina. And I imagine you could also use an action to regain stamina in the same way. One of these two rules, maybe both, I haven't figured that out yet. And then certain things are going to cost stamina. If you use the run action, which is like a haste, or it's a specific type of action you can do when you get an additional move. Use a run action, costs stamina, because at that point you're running. If you're using a regular movement, we'll use that as regular walking movement. That's the same type of movement you're going to have when you're aiming and shooting down the line and so forth. So that's going to be that. But if you do that other action, do I have my player's handbook nearby? Of course I do. I always like having it, even though almost everything's off by heart. I like not being caught up in an idea and then realizing that I've missed a rule. So now there's the dodge action. We're not going to think about the dodge action at a certain point. So it's the dash action. Okay, so if you use the I always get these confused. So it's the dash action. If dash action costs stamina, and the dodge action costs stamina. What that stamina cost is going to be based on your armor. And so light armor, I can't spell, is going to have let's say it's going to be 2 stamina per use. And then we'll say that medium, we'll say maybe we'll do 3, and heavy will equal 4. That's one example of how to do things. So light armor equals 2 stamina use, medium, and 3 heavy is 4. And obviously, we'll talk about the benefits of having armor. It's going to be more than just AC, and we may play with other rules on this. So that's stamina. And a reaction quick dodge will also use stamina. So that tells us at that point that every time you want to do a dash action, a dodge action, or the reaction quick dodge, which everyone's going to get, that's going to cost you stamina based off of your con score, and you can recover it. This is trying to replicate, and I imagine we're going to be doing something similar. Actually, I know we'll be doing something very similar in Helldivers. I wouldn't be surprised if we do a Helldivers adaptation that we're going to be playing with this exact mechanic. Both of these have that. Both of these have that type of thing. That being said, Helldivers doesn't throw a cost in for stamina. It's just simply a running mechanic. I don't know. I'll have to check whether or not their speed and the ability of diving, it's called, in Helldivers costs stamina. I just know it costs stamina in Remnant 2 because you can't dodge constantly. If you dodge constantly, you're going to run out of dodge and you have to wait till your stamina recuperates. So this is how we're going to kind of put that into the system. And so that's our quick dodge. And the other rule we're going to play with are specifically, let's see here now, characters, equipment. Are things called relics. Now, relics are these specific rules in the system that allow you to recover hit points. They give you certain abilities. As you gain abilities, you gain more relics. Most people start off with 3. Eventually, you can get up to 7 or 8 relics. Now, a relic is a very specific thing. It's a mechanic within the game where it costs an action to use. Actually, let's start this. This is going to be kind of a messy thing, but we're just going to keep on going it through there. So, relics cost an action to use, and now the reason why it's going to be there are some relics because there's actually different types of relics we can see here. I play heavily with, I don't know what everyone else uses. You start off with that one, but as you can see, there are tons of different ones you can use. And I want to say whatever the name is, there was one that's where it's really fast, where it activates very, very quickly. And that's the one I use. It doesn't recover as much hit points, but it does give you, it does make you do make you activate that ability faster. And in that situation, that one would take a bonus action to use. So that's the reason why by default a relic is going to be a single action. So we can see here some of the ability to change. Heals a user of 35% of a caster's max health. This one, innate 50% use speed bonus. So each of these does something differently. This is the default one that everyone gets. As you can see here, on use, heals 70 health over 0.5 seconds. We're not going to worry about the speed per se. Some of them do give you regeneration, and we'll talk about that in a second. So, constant action to use, they all have different uses, but the default one is probably going to, recover. We can say, let's just, because of the way the health works, recover basic one. This is the Dragon Heart, for example. That one's going to recover all hit points. Now, you might think that's incredibly powerful. We'll get to that in a second. But something like pulsing, decaying, diverting, quilting. Let's grab another one here. This is a resonating heart. Regenerates 50% of max health over 5 seconds. So in the case of the resonating heart, for example, it gives you like regeneration 5 for 5 rounds, right? And that's another one. And there are ones here, for example, that if you use, and we can see here, some of them converts 5 health to mod power and so forth. So we'll get into mod power in a second here. So they all do different things. But the important thing is this is the primary way for anyone to recover hit points, and everyone gets them. Starting characters, PCs get 3. They do not encumber because they're magic. Can't spell it again. Oh my god. Encumber. Okay. 30 pieces get 3. You can use on yourself or allies. But the most important thing is it raises... No, it doesn't. It doesn't raise characters from the dead. You just bring up characters. So when a character is down, you actually have to... No, you do use it on other characters. Yes. Okay. Can resurrect characters within, let's say, 10 rounds. So it can resurrect characters within 10 rounds. So if they're reduced to 0 hit points, using a Dragon Heart on them will bring them back. That's a big one. And I think one of the reasons why we're going to be playing with this is that is we're talking about hit points. And in a Remnant, same thing with Helldivers, characters don't gain additional hit points. They seem to have fixed hit points. You can have use abilities to give you more hit points, but your hit points at first level are basically going to be your hit points you're going to be staying with for the majority of the game. There are other things to reduce that. We'll talk about armor in a second. So, can resurrect characters within 10 rounds. And there are other specific ones. Ruined Heart, that one's health regeneration. Lifeless Heart heals 30 health over relic capacity is doubled. Constrained Heart on use regenerates 20 health. And let's see one other here. 20 use speed bonus. So one of them, there are probably a couple of them that can give you haste for a certain period of time. So that's basically the idea of a relic. It will resurrect people. How it resurrects, we'll go into specific ones, but that's a big rule right there. Okay, so we're into that. That's relics. And let's talk about, you want to talk about hit points? Okay, so we'll say hit points, and very specifically, I think we're going to play with the way 4th edition did it, which is... I guess the best way is con score equals hit points. Now that can really radically change people's hit points. So I want to be able to so con score equals hit points. This was something that fourth edition played with, and let's go here and let's try one more modifier. And I don't think it's going to be class specific. So we'll just say plus 10 hit points. So that the con score does affect it, but not as much as you might think. And I think this is something that Remnant plays with, but every character also, let's see, PCs regenerate 1 hit point at the end of their turn. If they don't, suffer damage and are above 1 hit point. Makes sense. Okay, so we got that out of the way. So people have more hit points at their con score, and then they're going to have an extra bunch of hit points, and there'll be some ability to regenerate as well. This is something that Remnant plays with. And let's see here. We'll talk about rings in a bit. Amulets, we'll talk about that. Armor. Okay, so armor, there are these... So the way armor works... we see a bunch of armor here. There's types of armor. Let's see. Is there a generic... whatever. Because I do believe... Because this talks about specific body armor. And I want to talk about armor in general. And armor has a couple sets. Now, this is something that Helldivers does as well. We're going to be playing with the fact that the way armor works. And the way armor works here, so we can see here there's 3 types of armor: light, medium, heavy, and ultra heavy. we've already talked about, obviously, if we want to add the ultra heavy, because we want to be faithful here, we'll see ultra heavy, and that'll cost 5. Once again, we're going to be playing with that. So light armor, 2 stamina, use medium, 3 heavy, 4 ultra 5. And there's also the, we'll talk about here, see, fast dodge, no stamina cost penalty. So that's interesting that they say no stamina cost penalty for dodging in light armor. That's normal dodge, 25%, 50%, 75%. It might be even better. It might be something where it's, if you're really light armor, it's 0 stamina use. You know, medium is 2, 4, and then maybe 6 for that. But we have a few other things here. Cost penalty, and we have something called flop. And heavy armor, we'll talk about here, and we'll talk about this in a new section, and we'll talk about, and we'll call it armor. And we'll say that there is light, medium, heavy, and ultra heavy. We play something like that with ultra modern. We have exo armor, which have their own set of rules. We're not going to muck around with these, so we know that light, medium, and heavy. Ultra heavy. Okay, so we know we're not going to bother changing the rules, but ultra heavy very specifically, that one's going to have no dex bonus like that, but it's going to say we already have the increased cost for dodging, and let's say reduces speed by 10 feet. Light, medium, heavy, ultra heavy, reduce speed by 10 feet. And there'll be more stuff on that one. Okay, so, and we know that there are, unlike D&D, which we've been playing with Helldivers, there are different armor sets. So there's going to be a helmet, body, legs, and gloves. Now, Helldivers doesn't do that. They just do main armor and helmet. This one uses helmet, body, legs, and gloves. Now, the other thing about these is that they don't really play around with, there's lots of armor sets. But if you click on one, and we're going to click on the Gunslinger set just because that's one I know. The High Noon, that's the one that they use. That's a medium armor set. And we can see that there is a weight and an armor value. So this is something that's interesting. When we get into technicalities, a good chunk of your hit points are determined by your armor. And so at this point, we can play around with the idea that we can say that armor dictates additional hit points, or we can look at its physical protection, and we can see values here as well. So we see bleeding, fire, lightning, that's kind of curse, and so these are the different values that you are defending, and I think the highest values you can get are 10 across the board. So we'll see that there is, let's see here, and we can see the individual armor sets, for example, what they offer. So we can see the this one 4, 6, and these do add together. So yeah, these values do add together. That's going to be convenient. So that means when you pick up different, you mix match armor, these values will definitely increase. So we can look at bleed and fire, lightning, curse. I can't remember what this other one is. I'm drawing a blank. And let's see here. So now with D&D, there's going to be cold as well. There's necrotic. So curse and necrotic are basically the same thing. So we're going to call that necrotic. Fire, lightning, and we'll add cold in there. And they don't really have bleed. Resistance, so we'll stick with just elements. So fire, lightning, necrotic, cold. We're not going to muck around with thunder. And let's see here, some which gamma types am I missing? So yes, cold. We're not going to deal with that, bludgeoning or anything like that. Acid. Fire, lightning, necrotic, cold, and I guess poison. And okay, I don't want to play around with radiant or force just yet, but maybe we'll throw in radiant. I'm trying to keep these low. Oh, never mind. Okay, so acid, fire, lightning, necrotic, cold, poison, radiant. So these are the individual values. We could also just do physical, because that'll cover your bludgeoning, and it'll cover your slashing and piercing and so forth. So acid, fire, lightning, necrotic, cold, poison, radiant, physical. Each of these will have a specific value. And what does that value mean? Because their values go from 1 to 10. Now we can say as simple as, the value, each armor has a resistance listing. So something like the High Noon Duds, for example. High Noon Duds, give you 4 flames. So that we could say that because knowing how much damage value can come out with, 4 is a bit medium, and we could say, because it can't just say resistance, and we can't, because right now D&D just has resistance immunity, just half, and we're not beholden to the philosophy of making everything just easier for easy sakes. So when we look at this, it's going to probably be 4, which equals, say, but do we do it? Yeah, we could say it's basically double. We can say each armor has a resistance value. That value is reduced from that damage inflicted. So in the case of the duds, it will be, let's see, A, F, L, N, C, P, R, P. So we got 2 P's. Oh, we'll change that to Marshall. M. That seems like a lot. That has way too many. We gotta bring that down. I would say maybe cold and fire can be merged. And I think necrotic and radiant can be merged. Because fire is temperature, right? So I'll just put I'll have a better name for it later, but we're just going to call it temp, and that'll eliminate cold. And radiant and necrotic are bosom buddies, so we'll call that life. Okay, so that reduces it down to acid, temp, lightning, life, poison, and martial damage. So everyone joining in, we are adapting 5e to Remnant 2 specifically. So now we're down to just acid, temperature, lightning, life, poison, and martial. That's not so bad. Just because, and someone's going to say we can probably remove some of these, some more. So remember, they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We've got one more than what they do. We'll leave it at that. So they don't have acid values there, so we're just going to put that at, say, 0 for now. They have a fire resistance. I think what we'll do, we'll kind of double their value. So something, if you have cold or fire resistance, then And if you have this specific set of armor, now these values do add up. I have to be aware of that. So now we'll keep it at 4 for now. And their life is their curse, and that doesn't do anything. So we'll go 0. Once again, I have 2 L's. I'm an idiot. We'll just do that. Call it electricity. And then life is 0. And finally, poison is going to be 0 for now as well. We'll probably change it up in later. And martial, we're going to throw in, say, we'll go and say 3. So we have electricity. Actually, it does have a value. It's 2. So this is just the duds. So regular electricity is 4. Life doesn't have anything. And let's put the bones and make that martial. And we'll do that for 2. And so these things do add up. So if you have a complete set, the complete set of the whole armor would be, still would be 0. And then we have 10, 9, 0, and 6. And then we'll make up the other ones later on. That's not so bad. Taking 10 damage off of a lightning or cold strike is not impossible, not difficult to believe. Taking 6 damage off of a martial strike also isn't bad. And that's for a medium set. Being able to take 10 off of everything is pretty good. And yeah, that's not so bad. Now, the question at this point is whether or not the armor value has an impact. Because as it stands now, even an ultra armor, let's see here there's a radiant set. And there's going to be specific rules for some of these, of course. All armor sets, okay, but there's also some very nice armor. Let's see, is there a heavy armor set in here? Fey Royal. That look, yeah, ultra heavy. Okay, so these values do get higher than 10. Okay, so that's not so bad. So a full set is 15, 13, 13, 13, and 13. So that's not so bad. We can work with that. And once again, but he's also looking at 180. So there is a definitive bonus to resilience. So these resistance settings are specifically just for the types of damage coming in. But we will say that specific armor sets can say either add additional hit points, which would make sense. And this is something we did with the Exo Armor and Ultra Modern. We were playing with the idea of creating additional hit points through the armor. And so we could do that. And we can say that light armor generally will maybe add 5 hit points. We can say that medium every armor is going to be a little different. Like we can make a table eventually if this ever gets more serious, where every set of armor can give you any from 11 or 10. But this is we're averaging. Same thing with the way D&D does it. It's just an average. Say it adds another 10, and we'll go heavy. Gives you plus 15. And then ultra heavy will give you plus 20. That seems believable. Now at this point, we're looking at the fact that there's a lot of damage resistance with stuff like the ultra heavy. Like the ultra heavy is great. Now we know that you're not going to be able to dodge that much. So we're trying to balance the fact that even if you do dodge, you're only going to get about 2 or 3 dodges. Well, light armor, you could do it constantly, which is going to be necessary because you can't take a hit. So this is this is an interesting way of handling things. I don't think we've seen a very specific application of this. So yeah, that's not so bad. Okay. All right, I'm liking this. I'm sure there's some balance going into it, but I so far I'm kind of liking this. Because, yeah, dodge action, dash, we get a lot more movement. We'll also probably throw a rule in. Let's see, what other mechanical rules are we going to be playing with? We haven't messed with actual movement rules. I did mess with movement rules a little bit in Ultramax, where the speed of your movement can change your AC. And that's something that's interesting. We may play with that as well. Somebody who dashes and then has a reaction dodge can get an even higher AC. And we'll talk about movement specifically here. And we'll say that at the end of your movement, and they're not going to say location. This is not going to be about moving one location to another location. It's not going to be distance traveled. At the end of your turn, sorry. Your total distance moved can't affect AC. But it's not going to get that much of a benefit in comparison. So I think like, let's say like 15 feet gets you +1 AC. 30 feet gets you a +2. 45 gets you +3. And say 60 gets you +4. 15 feet, blah, blah, blah. I think the next time I'll do this on the weekend so we can get more people watching. At the end of your turn, your total distance move can affect AC, 15 feet, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And once again, I think some of this is going to play into our Helldivers expansions as well. So 15 feet, 30 feet, 2 feet, 40 feet. Okay, so movement affects it. That's also going to help. And this is going to be another reason why the Ultra Heavy is going to he's going to have to weather a lot more damage because he's not going to be moving at all. So we've played with movement and we've played with hit points. We got the rules for relics and stamina. For those people who are just joining in, this is what we've got so far. We've added a new mechanic for stamina. And we have rules for relics, altered rules for hit points, and a quick little rule on movement. So that is mechanically what we need to worry about. Now, you can't shoot from the hip in Remnant. You have to aim. If you do an attack action, if you're not aiming from the hip, what happens is that you do a melee attack instead. There's no way to translate that mechanically. But we've obviously established the fact that we have our movement rules, and then you have to aim from the hip, and so you can't aim from the hip, so you have to aim. But when you do that, your movement is halved. Now, we can play with that as a mechanic by simply saying the moment you go to do an attack action, we can allow people to move from the hip, but we can give them a much better attack. Now, here's the other thing that's very important. People hit almost all the time in Remnant. It's just about doing enough damage to take down a creature. This is going to be a very controversial rule. So we're going to deal with an aiming mechanic. I'm thinking about this now on the fly. And if people disagree, you can talk about it in the comments. So aiming mechanic, it offers advantage, which is a big ability. Offers advantage, and when you do that, it reduces your speed by 50%. Now, we have something similar, once again, in Ultramodern. It's an ability that allows, you don't get, it's not as powerful as this, but it does give you the ability of using your movement. So if you decide to do this ability, you decide, it's basically, it's not an action. This basically for free on your turn. It's not a free action. I keep on telling people that there's no such thing as a free action. I got in trouble for this with Ultramodern because I kept on saying a free action. And anyone who's played D&D long enough knows exactly what a free action is. But a lot of new players don't understand what a free action is. In almost every version of D&D, except for 5th edition, there's been a definition of a free action, which is something you can do once without occupying an action. They eliminated actions as defined time in 5th edition. In 4th edition, for example, there was a move, there was a minor, and a standard action. They renamed some of those ideas in Pathfinder, but in 5th edition, it's an action, and then you can move, and move is a very amorphous type of thing. And we were playing with that with some of our mechanics. So for free on your turn, it's not a free action, but I made this to say, screw you, free action. Offers advantage until the end of your turn. For free, okay, so free on your turn must be at the beginning. So you must be able, you can't move and then activate it knowing that your action's over. So for free on your turn must be at the beginning. Offers advantage on ranged attacks specifically until the end of your turn. Reduces speed by 50%. So that's the aiming mechanic, and that'll allow us to do that. And so obviously, if you're aiming, you're going to be attacking, so you're not doing your extra boost of speed. So, for example, Ultra Guy, when he's aiming, is not going to be moving at all, where a light person could probably still move 15 feet and get that extra +1 bonus to AC. Okay, so that's an aiming mechanic. We've got that under control. So, this is basically covers armor. What we have now, these are a bunch of examples of armor. So we're dealing with now class. So I think we've gotten all the mechanical changes that we're going to be playing with when it comes to combat. We may end up popping up some more later. Okay, so archetypes. There are no classes, there are archetypes. Right, so we're going to go into archetypes. And, okay. So, let's go into archetypes. Actually, I already have this open. I'm not sure why I'm opening up here. We'll deal with weapons. Do I want to deal with weapons now? Okay, let's deal with weapons now, just because archetypes are going to occupy a lot of us time. So we have a bunch of weapons here, for example. Things are not going to really change so much. I mean, we have weapons that have fire rates, magazine size, and magazine size we don't have to muck with. Let's look at Nightfall, just for an example here. And the Nightfall has a damage value. Now, the way D&D works, everything's all dice related, and we want to be able to, and the amount of damage you inflict can depend on where you actually hit. That's the critical location. And now they have vulnerable spots. We're going to allow players the ability to hit vulnerable spots more often than just rolling a natural 20. We want to be able players to hit it on a more regular basis, so we're going to be offering rules for that, I think. So I think something like the Nightfall does 31 damage. I think because the weapons can vary wildly. Like the Deceit, for example, is 120. The Nightfall is 4.3, does 31 damage. That does 120. Rate per second 2. 4.3. So we have to figure out rules that cover weapon damage. We could be lazy and say it's 1 die 6, 1 die 8, 1 die 10. Add your dex modifier. But I think there's something, because I want to be able to play with the rate of fire. And remember that in D&D, you basically get one attack. So I think it'd be interesting that your gun dictates the number of times you could attack in a turn. That would be very interesting. Because the melee weapons are one attack. They're very heavy attacks. And since this game is so range-based, it'd be very interesting to play with that. So, weapons, they have a damage value. Now, with this, things gets interesting. If you're going to be attacking multiple times, do we want to bother with the die rolls? Players want to chuck dice, so we'll let players chuck dice. But normally, I think if we were going 100% faithful, we wouldn't have damage value, rolling dice for this. And so we'll looking at weapons that can do that different. Okay, so rate of fire equals number of attacks with an attack action. So obviously a weapon that gives you 4 will allow you to attack 4 times a turn. Theoretically, we could have weapons that do 4 or up to 8. We've seen, obviously, we can look into some of these weapons. Like this is a 4 rapid fire with a 22. Magazine will obviously, that balances it. A magazine is a universal idea, so we're not going to touch magazine. But we're looking at rate of fire, number of attacks with an attack action. Low is 2. High can get to up to 8. I mean, we really get down to it. And we look at some of these weapons here. Oh, good, this thing opens up. So 2.5. We're not gonna deal with fractions. So 2, 7, 11 with a machine gun. This is a situation where high is 8. This is where things get interesting. 1 target per attack, unless you're doing an area effect. This breaks some of the mechanics that I play with Ultramodern. With this system, 1 target per attack unless area effect. Used to be able to do multiple targets, but because your rate of fire is based off of your gun, we're going to say 1 target per attack unless you have a special ability. Or actually, we can say that there's a certain threshold. We'll say every 4. So number of attacks with an attack action. This is going to confuse people with attack. So for every 4, I don't want to say the word discharge. For every 4 shots, PC can change targets. So with weapons that have high fire rates, the moment you fire a 4th shot, you can switch your target for the next shot. That's very random, but we'll play with that for now. But we're saying that in a lot of these situations, a lot of these weapons, you have to attack the same target multiple times. So we have 11s, we have 2.3s crossbows. So we think we have a machine gun, because obviously we have the typewriter. I think 11 is the high, because that is a full-on machine gun. 10.2, 4, 2, 8.6. We know the Nightfall. 4.5. So we have some 2s, and at that point we can look at the damage value. So rate of fire, number of attacks with an attack action. Low is 2, high is 8. Every 4 shots, PCs can change targets, and damage values. We can look at dice rolling, and this is where I'm going to break my own rule. In one of my previous videos, I talked about the fact that in basic D&D, the damage values are always too high, and whenever firearm specifically, most people, when they homebrew firearm rules, they set the values too high, and I state that firearms need to have their damage values evened up with melee weapons purely from a mechanical perspective. Since we don't have to be beholden to 5e architecture, we don't necessarily have to go that route. We can make these guns do as much damage as we want, because we don't have to worry. We're dealing with a self-enclosed system, which is Remnant 2. So with this situation, we can have weapons that can do anywhere from... Now, this is another thing where there's a part of me that also wants to stick to just D6s, because it allows people to roll multiple dice. And it also reduces the random number generator a little bit. D6 always. I know people are going to... And range will be from, say, 1 die 6 all the way to, say, 6 die 6. Or even higher. We can have weapons that do 8d6. Because remember, if you're going to have a situation where you can have a fire rate as high as 8, that means you can do 8 die 6 in a single attack. So this is very different. This is going to be very unusual. Now we also notice that we don't have... There are ideal ranges. And we have that in D&D as well. Ideal range, full dice damage, and then beyond ideal range, we're going to say damage reduces. We can say it's 1d, and this is the reason why we're sticking with just d6s. We can say negative 1d6 per, and I don't know what the range is. We can say for every range increment, damage falls off until it basically becomes nothing. And that becomes interesting. Now, we can play with it. We can say the machine guns, for example, have a very high ideal range, but they don't do much damage per shot, and so forth. So that's something we can play with. So we look at something, let's go into something like the Enigma. And the Enigma is going to be 22 damage. So let's say that is 3d6, right? Rate of fire. We'll say, yeah, we'll do it. We'll put it at 4. And a magazine of 25. Now we have rules for reloading, so we're not going to worry about that. Let's think of another weapon. Now, these have their own specific rules. We'll get into mutators and all that in just a second. We're just dealing with the mechanics. Let's go to my weapon here. Oh, Deceit's one weapon. Like this is a very interesting one. Now, it says rate of fire is 2. It fires both shots at the same time. So this is a situation where both attacks would have to hit the same guy. So the Enigma, for example, is at that threshold where you have to hit the same target. But the Deceit, for example... I would say, and it also has a very high ideal range because I know this weapon, I've used it. I know the Deceit has kind of an insane long range. So we can actually say that this thing will do, maybe it does the full 8d6, right? Rate of fire is 2. Now this is obviously a situation where that gets that can get really. I mean, we're seeing how much damage these guys can do. Let's reduce that to say we'll make that we'll try to make this a bit more decent. We'll say that's 6. Rate of fire 2. Magazine's only 6. Now this is another balance because you need to be able to reload. Reloading will take an action. Obviously, their ability to make you. And that can, reloading can also play with that balance. So this weapon can get quite a few shots off, but this guy, 3 rounds, you got to spend a whole action basically reloading the weapon. And everybody, post comments if you're liking the ideas. If you dislike it, I'm open to feedback. This is how things happen. Now, the other thing we'll see here is something called crit chance. This tells you your odds of scoring a critical hit. Or it's a modifier, actually. So we see crit chance here, negative 10%. So we can easily add that as a rule. So crit chance 10%, 10%, 10%. We can see here, this one's 15%. Why does that one weapon have a negative? That's very interesting. Yeah, critical chance, yeah. And because I've used the Enigma. It's a fantastic. It has a wonderful electric attack, which we'll get into. And we won't we won't screw around with those just yet. But that's a very interesting point. So obviously we can also give a value for Crit. Now we can say it's +1, +2. For example, this one here is 0, or say +0, just so people know. But the deceit can be maybe a +2. And you can modify your crit modifier. So in the situation of deceit, it can score a critical hit on a 18 or 19 or a 20, where the Enigma still is stuck with just natural 20. And so you can have weapons that do that. The other thing we'll also see here is the weak spot damage bonus. Now this is something else, is the fact that there's something called, let's open up another chat. Let's go back to this weapon here. We'll see stagger modifier. We'll get into that in a second. Stagger's another rule. Forgot about that one. Weak spot damage bonus. So we can see here, this one does not give you a damage bonus at all, where this is a 90%. Now this is where things get interesting. Obviously we're dealing with hand-eye coordination in a third-person shooter. We can't apply that to a tabletop game. So how do we handle weak spots? Now someone's going to say weak spots are simply critical hits. You score a critical hit. Except the fact that's not how this game plays. There's a crit, and then there's weak spot. They are two different things. And so we actually have to include a new mechanic within this game, which is weak spots. What is a weak spot? So we've got the rules here. We're going to have to add in another rule in the mechanics section, and that is weak spot. What the hell is a weak spot? Okay, so weak spots. Performing a melee attack, lets loose a fragment which taints the blood of targets, causing all times while doing it. Weak spot. So weak spot tells you how much more damage you're going to inflict if you hit a specific location. How do you do that without just it being another variation of a crit? That's tough, because D&D defines crit. They define crit, but here it's kind of random. You may score a critical hit, where a weak spot is something that's eye-hand coordination. Now, that is really tough. I'm trying to avoid having to make another die roll. We can say, now there's something here, there's something we can work with. Okay. So you have an AC, and we do know that a nat 20 is a auto hit, and is also a crit. You can score a crit without a nat 20, as we've already established, and you can do. Score a crit without a nat 20, and we'll say as well that my issue is that means you can, I was thinking maybe the closer you are to the target's AC while you hit, like if you get above a certain value, then you automatically score a weak spot, but then you're automatically going to have a weak spot. You're going to compound crit with weak spot. And I'm trying to figure out a situation where you can crit and not score a weak spot, or you can sometimes do both. It must be the damage value. It must be the damage value. Okay. All right. So it must be the damage value. I'm thinking here. Okay. You know where we're going with this. Exploding dice. Okay. So if you score a max value on damage, which so far we're currently sitting at 6. So if you score a max value on damage, which is 6, roll an additional die. So this can get crazy, because remember, you're rolling in some cases 8 or 9 die 6s in a round. And we can say how many you can do that on a turn. And so each weapon has a maximum number of weak spot dies. And we'll call it a weak spot die. So a weapon, so let's say a weapon that does 4d6 damage has a weak of 2. And that means the maximum number of exploding dice per turn equals 2. The problem with this is someone's going to say, okay, we'll say once weak dice are used, regain them all at the beginning of your next turn. So that basically allows us, so if you don't use the weak spot dice, so let's go back up to here then, and we go back to something like Enigma, right? And the Enigma has no weak spot bonus. So the Enigma has its own rules we'll play with. So the Enigma has weak 0. You can't roll exploding dice with that one. But the Deceit, we can see he has a big weak spot damage bonus. Let's look at the other weapons in here. We have weak spot damage 100, 100, 105. We're not going to translate that to 10. So we can look at this one. If the weak spot damage is plus 100, we can say, for example, if your shots are 6, it's going to probably be about the same, 6. So you can have up to 6 more exploding dice for the Deceit. All right. So that's a one way of doing weak spot damage. There's also something called stagger. Now, I don't know. So we have something called stagger. All right. So stagger. Now, stagger allows you to basically cause a target. If you know, it's basically if you hit someone with a shotgun, they're going to stumble back. Now, we can see here, stagger modifier, -25, stagger modifier 5, 0. So this is definitely another situation. If we look into the Enigma, it doesn't really stagger people, and stagger is 5%. Okay. This is where we can play with the natural 20 or the crit. Now, we're already doing more damage with the crit anyway. Or no, maybe not. Maybe we can play around with the... Okay, let's look at crit here. We'll actually state that crit and stagger are basically the same. And we'll say that if you score a critical hit, because the thing is, people will know at this point that critical hits aren't doing much at this point, because we know the weak spot exploding damage will actually probably do way more damage than a critical hit. Because a critical hit just adds one more die, right? And so you're looking at that going, well, what's the point? I'm going to be doing way more damage with this. Well, we'll play with that. So we're going to call this critical hits stagger. If you score a critical hit, and we can, since this we're doing with the dice pools, like rolling a bunch of d6s, we can have, now we also should be noted that, I'm going to add that each die can only explode once. Let's just get that out of the way so people don't catch me on that one. If you score a critical hit, I want to say double number of dice, but that can get nuts. because you're dealing with 8 dice 6, you do a critical hit, you're doing 16 dice 6, you're going to get a whole bunch of weak spot damage. And yeah, a critical hit should do that much, could do a lot of damage, but that's kind of going crazy. Well, there's ways we can play with it. We can say on a critical hit, weak spots explode on a 5 and a 6. We can do that. That's a big one. That could really help increasing the amount of damage. You can still increase damage die, but should it just be 1 or should it be? Oh, we'll say 50%. Rounded up. So it's not double, it's a bit extra. So that is that. Maybe I won't do that then. We're going, so that maybe won't. I did like the idea though. But it seems like that could be really crazy, especially if you're adding 3 or 4 more dice 6 and the chances of you see, I like this one more than this one. You know what? We'll go no. We won't do increased damage die. We will say increase damage die by 1, which is what a crit does. But we'll also say double attribute modifier, because you're still doing your attribute modifier on these things. But then we'll say stagger. Now, what the hell is a stagger? Target must make a DC. I want to say con. We'll say a DC physical saving throw. Now, what the hell does that mean? That means you pick the highest modifier between strength, dex, and con. I want to say should we? Okay, so this is okay. So stagger modifier is going to modify that DC. The DC by standard is say 10. Failure. Now, unfortunately, I hate to say it, but D&D doesn't, 5th edition doesn't have much. We can say it's stunned, but I have a funny feeling people are going to find ways to stun lock monsters a lot. And there's a part of me that wants to just add in the rules for dazed. I mean, we can. I mean, we are messing with the rule system, so why not? My guess is that target is dazed. Dazed targets can either move or take an action. Not both. Attacks have disadvantage. Similar to blinded, but not exactly like. Weapons offer modifier. Okay. So, back to weapons. We keep on doing this. And this is how things work here. So reloading cost an action, blah, 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 blah. Weapons offer modifier. So we go back to here and we'll say stagger, because we'll see that stagger modifier. And so we can see that the Enigma doesn't have one, or actually it's a negative. We'll see -1, which means it's going to be a DC 9. The reason why I'm doing it this way and not putting in a rule saying it's a DC 10 or 12 or 13 is that you can probably get magic items that will adjust your stagger, which you can. But we look at deceit, its stagger modifier is 5%. Let's look at some of these other weapons here. Stagger modifier is 10, 0, 0, 5, 5, 5, -25. So some of them really have I don't see huge bonuses more than 10. 0, 5, 70. So that one basically doesn't stagger at all. 15, 5. Okay, so we're basically not seeing much for that. So in the case of the Enigma being negative 15, we'll say that's negative 2. Weapons that are 75%, like that'll be like negative 8, because basically making it impossible to stagger. And so because this one's a plus 15, oh, I'm sorry, yeah, negative 15, and then this one is a plus 5. We'll say the stagger in this one is plus 5, so it's a DC 15 effectively, or we can see plus 3. And if it's a plus 10, it'll be plus 6, which will get you to 16. So that's the stagger modifier. So that makes it slightly harder for targets to get staggered. So these are our 5e rules for 2 weapons, as an example. So if we look at the Nightfall, which I've been sitting on, what are its rules going to be? Well, its damage is going to be, let's put that up here. So Nightfall, now we're looking at before, I think the Nightfall, when we look at the Enigma 22 to Nightfall, it's probably still going to be about 3d6. And then the rate of fire we can see is 4.3. So I think it's still going to be about the same. Yeah, it's about the same. So it's going to have a rate of fire of 4. Its magazine is 10. But we can see here that stagger modifier is 15, which is actually really good. So we can see max crit shot, weak spot damage. So with a crit chance is plus 5. So we're just going to do a plus 1 for that. Weak spot is actually really good. So we're going to put that weak spot at, probably we'll do as high as 6. At 105, that's weak spot of 6. And stagger. So this is actually a pretty high value. So this we'll put this at 6. So this is a situation where, now it seems like the Enigma is weaker than the Nightfall. Nightfall is a very powerful weapon. I know that the Enigma has its own little fun rule, which we'll get into. So Nightfall is damage 3 die 6, rate of fire 4, magazine 10, crit weak 6, stagger 6. So we do know that they have their own little abilities. For example, now let's go back to Enigma, because Enigma has its own little special rule. The specific thing with Enigma is that it actually arcs. It's a lightning weapon. And we didn't talk, so people who know what I'm talking about, it we're going to ignore its modifier, but we can see here, fires an electric stream that jumps nearby targets 7.5, dealing 30% of damage. So that's the Enigma's real bonus, right? The Enigma, you know, on a hit, secondary attack, and a secondary attack does 2 die 6, right? Jumps to nearby targets within 7.5 meters. Obviously, secondary attack against targets within 10 feet. We'll see 2 die 6 damage. Got a few more people joining up. 2 die 6 damage on the arcing. And this is also the other important thing we haven't mentioned, of course, is that the Enigma is lightning damage. And the Deceit and Nightfall are both just traditional piercing attacks. That doesn't change. Oops, sorry, a little bit of... Ignore all the spelling mistakes and grammar. I'm doing this kind of rough and duty. Okay, so for those people who are joining up here, because we're now up to 6, we're dealing with adapting Remnant. So we've played around with now that your weapons will dictate how many attacks you have per turn, not your class. Although you're limited in number of your targets, all weapons do D6, but the number of D6s can change between 1 and 8 depending on what the weapon is. There's an ideal range. Oh, I forgot to put ideal range for these weapons. Now the Enigma, this is where Enigma gets nerfed a lot. So when you do ideal, it's going to be like maybe 10 feet at tops, because it's a lightning weapon. It's a very short range weapon. The Deceit, much different situation. Its ideal range is going to be really high. So ideal range is probably going to be something like maybe even 100. If you go into long Deceit, we can see, yeah, ideal range 28. We're going to ignore fall off range just for a second. Yeah, so that's 12 meters. Ideal range we can see for this one would be like 100 feet, for example, which means that it's not going to see much damage fall off. So there we go. So that's our system there. So now we're looking at weapons they really, really heavily change how you do things. This is a huge philosophical deviation for 5th edition where your character does everything. But we do know that with a lot of first-person shooters, weapons are the man. And it's one of those things where you have to take into consideration what weapon you're going to be using and how it affects how your character operates. And like I said, there'll be classes that will play around with this. So this is a big one. Like we've really played, we've really mucked around the rules a lot more than Armor has. So let's quickly talk about mutators since we're here. I won't be on this for long. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. We'll probably have to make a second part for this, which is fine. Maybe we'll do one on a Sunday. What am I doing this Sunday? I think I'm actually free this Sunday. So mutators are a specific type item with the unique ability to enhance your weapons significantly. They introduce additional stats or passive abilities that can boost your arsenal. So a mutator attaches to a weapon, and we can see here some of the mutators. Increase range damage by 2% for every 10. This is the other thing that's really important. We will talk about this next time, and that is leveling. When we talk about archetypes and leveling, because we haven't talked about the fact that you can have weapons that are leveling. And this is going to be a really interesting way of doing things. For example, we've stated that dice value are between 3 to 6 and 6 to 6. We will probably reduce that with levels, right? Because these weapons get levels. So with Remnant, there are 3 things that you level. Your guns can level from 1 to 10. Your mutators can level from 1 to 10. You can level 1 to 10, and you have 2 archetypes. Each one levels 1 to 10. You level 1 to 10 through traditional experience. Your weapons level for mutators and so forth by finding resources. Because once again, this is a loot and shoot, so you're picking up a material, and then you're spending that material. And we're not going to worry about the economy with this adaptation. But the point is that you can go to somebody, spend resources, and get a weapon leveled up. So in this situation, when we look at the way weapons level, we're going to kind of assume that these weapons, this is where things can get really stupid. Because if we go back to something like Deceit, we'll see the upgrade levels, and we'll see how much damage it inflicts per level. We can use their economy, right, in the exact same way. We can have players, and then the GM can reward them scrap, luminite crystals, and iron, and then they can go, and then they can upgrade their items. But how do we do that? Now, we notice here, for example, that it only seems to affect damage. Let's look at this one. Same thing applies. It only affects damage. It does not affect range. We can follow that pattern, right? So if we look at specifically the Enigma, we can say, now we can see the damage values from 1 all the way to 93. This is a situation where, This is a situation where we can certainly have extremely powerful enemies. This is a situation where we'll see whether or not traditional 5e monsters will work, or this could be a situation where, once again, players, monsters, maybe they're not balanced toward each other, so that a player weapon does way more damage than the enemy is doing to you, because you've simply added a lot of hit points. Now, normal D&D people know this quite well. So you can have a situation where every level you gain another D6. That will get insane. And I don't know if I want to start that, especially since we look at this weapon in 93. We look at this weapon, 360, right? So we can see that this weapon does way more damage than something like the Nightfall. Nightfall and the Enigma. I imagine these two weapons are very similar in how they do damage. Yeah, 93. So the Nightfall, although they start off with about the same amount of damage, the Nightfall gains a lot more, and that makes sense because the Enigma's benefit is entirely in its arcing damage. It's fantastic for taking out chum and small targets. So this is a situation, and this is why there's a part of me that doesn't want to deal with the dice sixes. But people want to chuck dice, and I won't take away the idea of chucking dice. But normally we would just say you're doing 33 points of damage, and now you do 93 points of damage. So we have to look at this logically and think about how to translate these damage increases into this system. And I think I have a solution. That solution, folks, is West End Games. I am old enough to remember West End Games and their D6 Star Wars system. Please comment if this is familiar to you. So West End system, your ability scores weren't based on static numbers. You had a die, and that die was 2 die 6, 3 die 6, 4 die 6, 5 die 6. But as you improved, you didn't just get a die. You got a modifier first, and then it increased to the next die. And that was okay. So and this can change for each one. So with the Enigma specifically, we have levels 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That damage changes. So it's going to be 3 die 6 level. So we're going to start off damage is, see, 3 die 6. We may even make it even smaller. We may make it 2 die 6 just because, and say 2 die 6 plus 1, 2 die 6 plus 2, and I can't remember if it jumped right to 3d6 at plus 2. I think it did. So 3d6, and then 3d6 plus 1, 3d6 plus 2, 4d6, and then 4d6 plus 1, 4d6 plus 2, and then 5d6. So that's the way. If we follow the philosophy from West End, that's the damage increases from this weapon. Now, when we look at the deceit, I'll do a summary video for this one. So with this one, we have deceit does 6 die 6. So we'll drop that down to 5. Now 5d6. Now we'll see that this weapon proportionally does a lot more. So once again, 93, that's a pretty good scale. And when we get to, where the hell is it? There it is, 360. It is a huge value higher. So we'll see how that works. So 5 die 6, 5 die 6 plus 1, 5 die 6 plus 2. That being said, it's going to already always be higher. So let's look at the values here. 6 die 6, 6 die 6 plus 1, 6 die 6 plus 2, 7d6, and then 7d6 plus 1, 7d6 plus 2, and 8d6. Now, I think it should be more than that. We got to get the deceit to, I think the deceit needs to get to 10d6. So the way to do that is to take out a step. So at 2, then she jumps to 6 die 6, 6 die 6 plus 2, That might be too much, though. 7d6. 7d6 plus 2. 8d6. 8d6 plus 2. No, actually, I think that works. 6d6. And then 9d6 plus 2. So that's actually, I think that actually worked. So 5 to 6, 66, 2, 77, 76, 2. So this is a larger damage scale. So we can actually change the damage scaling. And we can even play with it. We can see 5 to 6, 1 plus 1 plus 2 plus 3, then 66. So we can change it per weapon. So these are the levels you have to hunt and forage in the game. And when you kill monsters, they'll basically fire off these things. And we can see here, and I know this, the way the system works, iron, luminite is pretty, scrap is pretty easy. When we get to here, we can see the scrap is much higher, but you also get hardened iron. Hardened iron is like ultra rare. So it's kind of like silver, gold, platinum. There's, you have to find it and you can't forge it. And so it takes a bit of time, but that's damage values. This does mean that once we hit monsters, they're going to have, well, yeah, it's going to make sense. We're going to have situations where you could have boss monsters that are going to have, like, you have Chum, and Chum's going to have 40, 50, 60 hit points because you want to be able to kill them all in one shot. And then you're going to have situations where monsters will have 500, 600, 700 hit points, maybe 1,000 hit points. And so having a 9x6 weapon is going to make sense. And you're going to have to say, we can't take them on until we grind, get our equipment up, and so forth. Okay, so that's leveling. Let's look at the way the mutators work. Where did I have the mutators again? Okay. So we have here, remnant range mutators as we want. Grants 10% chance to return spent ammo. That's pretty standard. So mutators, okay, let's go here and let's put this up and level up like weapons. Now, if we click on one of these, okay, and we can see here some of the ways they modify them, right? Range hits increase the next weak spot hit by 10% per stack. So we can see ones that will increase the weak damage dice, ones that'll increase stagger. Because we'll notice, for example, like this Nightfall or this Deceit, for example, that we're not changing the weak. Weak is still 6. So even when you roll 9 dice 6, your weak is still 6. And so you can have mutators that'll increase that. And so when we have one here, like some of them are going to be a bit more difficult than others because there's no slow. There is a slow, but it doesn't work the same way. Shots return ammo 20% of the time. Some like this on hit grants 10% chance. Let's open up a few of these here. Battery. What's bottom heavy? Fire rate. Let's look up Time Wave because I know that one's a very popular one. Twisting Wounds is also very popular. And Refunder. So let's look up those. So battery, once again, and this tells you everything you need to purchase, and they also have levels. Level up like weapons can be attached. But takes 5 minutes. I'm saying it takes 5 minutes to attach a mutation just for balance sake, so you're not swapping a mutator in combat. So it takes 5 minutes. So obviously it can be done as part of a short and long rest, but it takes 5 minutes to swap out. And so let's give an example here. Let's look at the way the battery works. So battery has 10 levels. So let's look that up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so battery has 10 levels. Range hits increase the next weak spot by 11% per stack. Now, this is one where, like, if you do a hit, see how do we do that? Okay, hit a target Weak increases. Now this one, they can do percentages. We can't do incremental because, unfortunately, because I really don't want to do it every 2 levels. That'll really suck. But we already established that weak tells you the amount of dice damage that'll explode. And do we want to give it as high as plus 10? Because that almost triples some of these. And when we look at Enigma, for example, it's weak as 0, so it doesn't increase. And that's what you wouldn't do. You wouldn't put the battery in the Enigma because it wouldn't increase your damage. So we'll say increase weak, increase by 1. So this is where things get interesting. Hit a target, weak increases by 1 until the end of your turn. And we can throw in... So this is... Now, they have max 5 stacks. We're not going to play with that here. Speed by 1 until the end of your turn. But how do I do the next one? Now, we can go to 2, but I don't want to. I want to have the week 2 here. I want to do it every 2. So we need to find something you get if you get your battery to level 2 that's thematically similar to this. Oh, that's tough. So... So we know we can play with these here. Oh, don't do that. I don't... It's okay. Oh, for love of God. Okay. This is when I'm dealing with editing. Okay, so 3, 5, and 9. So that goes up by 2, 3, 4, and 5. So now I need something that'll fill in these extra gaps. Now, they have the max stacks 5, because once again, that percentage increases. I don't want to have it modify stagger, because I'm sure there's something else that modifies stagger. Battery is simply weak spot hit damage. Let's go back to weak spot here. Okay. I can say that each die can be exploded more than once. But that seems... That can be really powerful. We can say exploding dice can explode 1 additional time. And we can kind of run with that. And then that goes 2, 3, 4. Now the reason why I'm not too worried about this, because the odds of somebody having a dice explode 6 times is pretty statistically almost impossible. So I'm not going to worry about that at the moment. Let's look at another one. So bottom heavy increases fire rate. Increases fire rate specifically for every 10% of magazine missing. That's going to be tricky. When we look at, what's this one, bottom heavy? Now that being said, we can just ignore we could ignore the magazine missing, because that can get really tricky. Interesting. It just... The other thing, unfortunately, is that some of these... Let's go back to battery for a second. So this one, 20% damage. The next weak spot deal. So this is one of the things about level 10s are usually a bit more powerful. I'm not worried about the weapon. Weapons doesn't seem to matter that much. We can just add one more of these, actually. And that makes that level 10 a bit more powerful. Now, back to bottom heavy. Fire rate depends on your magazine size. I don't know if I want to play with that. But that being said, I also don't want to incrementally increase the fire rate. So we can say ROF +1. And that doesn't become so bad. Sorry, that goes 2, 3, 4, and 5. That being said, a 5 rate of fire gives you 5 additional attacks. That can get really crazy. And once again, you wouldn't do this with Deceit because Deceit only has 6 shots, which means you would blow your load very, very quickly, and then you'd have to reload, and that takes an action. So situations like this, some weapons are better matched up with others, which is accurate within the game's architecture. So, but it's based on magazine. Okay. Right. If magazine is below 25%. Yeah, because it has to be. And we can play with... actually, we'll make things simplistic. So it's 10%. Now, we'll say 20%. ROF +1 if magazine is below 30%. Now this is, once again, this is rounded up. If below 20%. And it also should be noted that these abilities replace each other. So, and this one's going to be ROF if magazine is below 30%. If magazine is below oh god, this is tough because one party wants to oh man, this is tough because I could do 25, but some of these clips, it's barely going to matter because I want to increase these, but I don't want to increase them too much. I don't want someone to have a high rate of fire right away. So, okay, we're going to continue doing this. Hope 3 is below 20%. ROF is +3 if magazine is below 30%. ROF if magazine is below 20%. ROF is +4 if magazine is below 30%. ROF if magazine is below 20%. And then ROF is +5 if magazine is below. And this is where things get interesting. We'll say 40%. So that's one way of doing that. Okay. Do we want to do one more? Time wave. Applies slow on all enemies within 7.5, and then that time increases. The range never does, but the time increases. For that, this is one situation where it might get a little tricky. So we know, let's look at this. Specifically, we're going to be looking at a slow effect. Now, a slow effect we can say -2 penalty. This is a slow effect, by the way. This is the slow spell. There's no slow condition, but there is a slow spell. -2 penalty, AC, and Dex saving throws. Can't use reactions. So that's a slow effect. And can either use bonus or action, not both. Can only make one attack with an attack action. And there's some other limitations as well. I don't know why slow is just simply not a condition. It should be. So we're going to do that. We're going to say, we're going to add the condition slow because it should be there. We already have the stagger. So we have conditions and we'll have stagger. And stagger equals days. And we know what days are. Days targets. Give me the intent, not both. We have slow. Now, slow okay. Very specifically, copy paste things, make things easier. That's a slow spell. So if that's a slow spell, attack into the next turn, and the creature must use its action on that turn to complete the spell, blah, 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 the spell is wasted. This will also affect special actions as well. So that's a slow effect. Slow, we can go back up to Time Wave. And this is where things get interesting. DC 13, is it a Wiz saving throw? Yeah, it's a Wisdom saving throw. Yeah, once again, I don't know why it's out. It's going to be a Con saving throw. Failure. Target is slowed until the beginning of your next turn. Targets within 5 feet. Simple. So that seems pretty simple. And then I'm going to put that and copy paste that onto everyone. Like that. So how do things change? Well, first things we can change, we can go 14. And this distance is going to increase to 10 and 14. This one's going to be 15 and 14. It's probably too high at this point. I think this should be probably DC 10. I know people really hate that, but point is that certain creatures, yeah, because they'll go up to DC 15. We don't want this to be DC 20 because it's going to get OP. So 10 feet to 11, 5. No, it's 5 feet, then 2 10 feet. So 2 5 feet, 2 10 feet. So this one goes 7, this one here, this goes to 12. Now we're at 15 feet. It's still at 12. This is still at 15 feet, but now we're at DC 13. Now we're at 20 feet. And the DC is still 13. DC 20 feet. And the DC is now 14. This will stay 14. but this range will increase to 25. This will stay 25, but this now increases DC 15. Oh my god, that actually might have worked. That actually might have worked. Holy shit. Okay, so that's how we're going to do Time Wave. Twisting Wounds. Increase range damage of this weapon by 11% to bleeding targets. Okay. We're going to have to deal with bleeding. Okay. So that's going to be... We already have conditions. Oh, I don't know why this is constantly getting indented. There we go. So that's conditions. Put that up there. There we go. And we are going to talk about, specifically, we're going to talk about bleed. What is bleed? Well, bleeding is a condition. Let's take a look how the bleeding works for Remnant. Okay. So bleed are specific weapons. Let's see here. Now, obviously a bleed is going to have, okay. Weapon that inflicts bleed inflicts half the shot damage in dice. No ability modifier, so it's just a dice at the beginning of the attacker. Oh, actually, at the beginning of the target's turn. And you can see a DC 10 con save recovers. This is very much in note form, so I do apologize. So basically what I'm saying here is that if you hit with the target and you do 3 die 6, then you'll be rolling 2 die 6 damage at the beginning of the target's next turn. They take that bleeding. DC 10 free end of turn recovers. Well, DC 10 con save, specifically con save. End of turn recovers. So it's a pretty easy thing to recover from. But actually, we can mildly say that bleeding is not. It's not half the shot damage. 1d6. And damage. Yeah, that's a pretty simple. It's a pretty simple one. I think it's a really, really simple ability. So we've implemented that. So if we look at the Twisting Wounds, increases range damage of this weapon by 11% to bleeding target. So we can say we're not dealing with. So we can say Twisting Wounds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And since we know what this does, you could easily play around. There's 1 die 6 plus 1. And we can just keep on doing that. I mean, just increasing the damage, increasing the DC accordingly. So, 1 to 6 plus 1, and the DC increases to 11, 2, and then this one stays 2, and that increases to, oh, this says 11. So 11, that becomes 12, and this becomes 12. This is 13, this is 13, this is 14, this is 14, and this is 15. So definitely it'll make the DC a lot higher. 1d6 plus 1, plus 1, plus 2, plus 2. And as before, following our patterns, 2d6, 2d6 plus 1. Nope, it's going to stay 2d6. This is going to increase 2d6 plus 1, 2d6 plus 1, and then 2d6 plus 2. And finally, now this is the level 10 ability, so it has to be more powerful. So it's going to jump right to 3d6. So it's going to, nope, sorry, that's level 10. We're not there yet. Okay, so 2d6 plus 1, that goes to 1, that stays 1. This goes to 2d6 plus 2. So DC 14, DC plus 2, and then this is DC 15. Oh, this is 10. Okay, so this is 10. So this should be 3d6. So this jumps and the DC. So getting to level 10 gives you the more. Bleed inflicts 3d6 damage and a DC 15 to recover. So this is definitely a very powerful one, especially when you get to level 10. That's pretty good. I think that's a pretty good option. So we've done 3 of the mutators, 4 mutators. We've done 2 guns. Giving an example. We're not going to do all of them. We're giving out examples here. And we've already dealt with armor. Armor was the easier one. Now, you would think an armor would be leveled as well. And it's one thing about Remnant 2 I was really surprised at, that they did not offer levels for armor. I would, and if I had carte blanche and we weren't trying to do 100% faithful adaptation, I would probably do the same thing to armor, because I think there is ways to do that. Because you have these 6 different values. You could incrementally increase. It would be really easy to add 10 levels of armor and thematically follow the procedure. You know, if I was doing an official one and Remnant, and I had the rights to Remnant 2, and I was playing around with the rules, and I was making an official publication, I'd probably add that in, because I don't think it would really dangerously affect game balance so much. So, okay, so we are at 160 minutes. We're at 2 hours. I was kind of the limit I was giving myself. We have gotten the new mechanics, and we've gotten the mutators and the guns. The one thing we haven't touched yet is archetypes. That's going to be what we're going to deal with next time. Maybe I will do it on Sunday so that more people can maybe attend and get more feedback. I'm also going to do a video where I'm going to go through these modifications and summarize everything. I don't want to move these. Almost sneezed there. But I'll leave it at that. Thank you guys for watching. And I will leave it at that, and I will see you guys, and I hope you enjoyed this. And if you did enjoy it, please comment and see what other ones you want me to do in the future.